The night was super quiet in the Hollywood Hills. Keanu Reeves's giant house sat high on the hill, shining like a castle. The city lights far below sparkled like stars, but up here, everything was peaceful. Only the wind made soft noises as it moved the leaves in the trees. 3 sneaky people were hiding outside the house. Their names were Liam, Sophia, and Diego. They were thieves planning to break in. Liam, the leader, crouched behind a bush and watched the house carefully. Sophia, the smartest of the group, worked on her special computer tool to unlock the gate. Diego, the strong one, stood near the road, keeping an eye out to make sure no one saw them. "This is the big one," Liam whispered, sounding excited. "This guy is rich. We're going to get so much money tonight." Sophia rolled her eyes but kept working. "This isn't some regular lock," she muttered. Her fingers flew across her screen, solving treaty puzzles. Then suddenly the gate made a soft click and opened. "Got it?" Sophia said with a smile. The 3 of them slipped through the gate quietly. They wore black clothes to blend into the shadows. Liam carried a bag full of tools, Sophia held her tablet, and Diego gripped a heavy crowbar. The house was huge and fancy. Its walls were made of glass that sparkled in the moonlight, and the shape of the house looked super cool, like something out of a movie. Inside they could see expensive art on display, paintings, sculptures, and rare treasures. "This guy must be living the dream," Diego whispered in awe. "Focus," Liam snapped. "We're not here to admire stuff. Get moving." Sophia used her tablet again to turn off the house's alarm system. The thieves sneaked inside. The living room was enormous, with big windows showing the city below. The air smelled like cedar wood and everything was super clean. But the thieves didn't care about that. They were looking for valuables. Liam spotted a small golden figurine on a marble table and reached for it. "Wait," Sophia whispered sharply. "Doesn't this feel weird?" "What are you talking about?" Liam asked. But even he felt something strange. The house was too quiet. There were no barking dogs, no buzzing machines, no security guards. It was like the house was holding its breath. Liam ignored Sophia's warning and grabbed the figurine anyway. Then it happened. The doors and windows slammed shut with a loud bang, making the whole house shake. Red lights turned on, bathing the room in a creepy glow. Diego dropped his crowbar in shock. "What's going on?" he yelled. Before anyone could answer, a deep, scary voice filled the air. It was calm but powerful. "Welcome, intruders. Your presence has been noticed. Escape is no longer an option." Sophia's hands shook as she frantically tried to hack into the house's system. "It's not working," she whispered, terrified. "Whoever set this up is way better than me." The room went dark for a moment. Then a screen came down from the ceiling, flickering to life. A shadowy figure appeared on the screen. The voice spoke again. "You've made a big mistake coming here. This house is no ordinary house. It's a test." "A test?" Diego shouted, his fists clenched. "Who are you?" "You may call me Alaric," the voice replied. "Tonight you'll be tested, not for your strength but for your character. Let's see who you really are." Before the thieves could respond, the floor started moving. Walls rose up between them, separating the 3 of them into different rooms. They yelled for each other, but it was no use. The last thing they heard was Alaric's chilling words. "Welcome to your reckoning. Let the games begin." Far below the house, in a hidden control room, a man watched the intruders on a wall of screens. His name was Ethan Cross, but to the thieves he was Alaric. Ethan used to work for the CIA, creating treats and tests to mess with people's minds. But after losing his family and job, he disappeared. Keanu Reeves, an old friend, had let Ethan stay at his mansion to recover. Instead, Ethan turned it into a high-tech trap, a place to push people to their limits and see if they could change. Ethan studied the thieves. Liam was a sneaky leader who always betrayed people for money. Sophia was a smart hacker who used her skills to hurt others and get rich. Diego was a tough guy who ran from his past and left his loved ones behind. "Let's see what kind of people you really are," Ethan whispered, pressing buttons to start their tests. In Liam's room, strange things happened. The walls lit up with glowing images of people he had betrayed. Their faces were sad and angry, staring at him. Liam shouted, "Leave me alone." He swung his fists at the images, but they didn't go away. The deep voice of Alaric spoke. "Liam Parker. A man who lies, cheats, and betrays. Do you ever think about the people you've hurt?" Liam tried to act tough. "You don't know me," he yelled. "Oh, but I do," Alaric replied calmly. "I know about the partner you betrayed for money. I know about the young couple you stole from. I know about your own brother who needed your help, but you left him behind." As Alaric spoke, more faces appeared on the walls, people Liam had treated and hurt. a young woman who trusted him with her money, an old man whose treasures he had stolen. Each face seemed to accuse him. "Stop it!" Liam screamed. He fell to his knees, covering his ears, but the voices didn't stop. They said things like, "You ruined my life, and you betrayed me." One last image appeared, a woman named Claire. She had been his partner during a heist, and Liam had left her behind to get caught. Her hologram looked so real, with tears streaming down her face. "Why did you do it, Liam?" Claire asked, her voice filled with pain. "We were a team. I trusted you. I didn't have a choice," Liam said, his voice shaking. "You always had a choice," Claire replied sadly. "You just chose yourself." The walls suddenly went dark, leaving Liam alone. He felt the weight of his choices crushing him. He whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to turn out like this." Alaric's voice returned. "Do you feel the truth now, Liam? Do you see the damage you've done?" Liam couldn't answer. For the first time he saw who he really was, and he didn't like it. In Sophia's room, the walls were covered in mirrors. Everywhere she looked, she saw her own reflection staring back. She tried to use her tablet to hack the system, but it didn't work. The screen just flashed "Access denied." Alaric's voice spoke. "Sophia Duca, a brilliant hacker who uses her talent to destroy lives. How many people have suffered because of you?" Sophia glared at the mirrors. "I did what I had to do to survive," she shouted. "Survival is your excuse," Alaric replied. "But deep down you know the truth." The mirrors rippled, and suddenly they showed scenes from Sophia's pasta. Families crying because she had stolen their money. An innocent man being arrested because Sophia framed him to save herself. Sophia looked away, but the mirrors followed her. "Do you feel proud of what you've done?" Alaric asked. Sophia's hands shook. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The images wouldn't let her hide from the truth. In Diego's room it was dark and cold. A single light bulb swung above his head. A punching bag hung in the center of the room. When Diego touched it, the bag burst open, spilling photos onto the floor. He picked up one photo. It was his daughter, smiling at him. More photos showed his wife, his parents, and the family he had left behind. Alaric's voice spoke. "Diego Torres. The strong one. The protector. But who protects the people you abandoned?" Diego clenched his fists. "Shut up," he shouted. "I know you've tried to bury your past," Alaric said. "But it's time to face it." Diego looked at the photos, tears in his eyes. He missed his family, but he had left them to live a life of crime. Now he couldn't run from the pain. Sophia stood frozen as the first memory came to life before her. She was in a dimly lit office, where a man sat hunched over his desk. His hands were pressed against his forehead. Sophia knew him right away. It was Mr. Hampton, the hospital administrator whose computer system she had hacked 3 years ago. Back then she had stolen patient records and sold them for a lot of money. On the screen Mr. Hampton looked up. His face was pale and he looked very worried. "We're going to lose everything," he whispered. His voice was shaky. "The lawsuits, the fines, we can't recover from this." Sophia's heart felt tight as she watched him. She had told herself at the time that hacking into the hospital system wasn't a big deal. She thought it was just business and it didn't matter who got hurt. But now, seeing how much pain she had caused, she felt guilty, something she never expected to feel. The mirror in front of her changed. Now it showed a young man being dragged away by police officers. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She knew him. It was James, another hacker she had blamed for her crime to cover her tracks. James's face was full of confusion and pain as the officers pushed him into the back of a police car. "I didn't do this," he shouted. "You have to believe me." Sophia had planted fake evidence on James's computer, knowing it would be enough to get him arrested. At the time, she thought it was the only way to protect herself. But watching him now, her stomach felt sick. She could see how badly she had hurt him. The mirror changed again. This time it showed a little girl holding a torn teddy bear. Her big eyes were full of fear. Sophia's heart sank as she recognized the child. She was the daughter of a businessman Sophia had ruined with one of her cyber attacks. Sophia's target had been the man, not the little girl. But because of her actions, the family had lost everything. The girl's soft, trembling voice reached Sophia's ears. "Why did you hurt my daddy?" Sophia backed away, shaking her head. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said, her voice shaking. "It wasn't personal. I was just trying to survive." A voice came from nowhere. It was Alaric, the person testing her. "That excuse won't work, Sophia," the voice said firmly. "Your choices weren't about survival. They were about greed and power. But everyone leaves a trail behind, even you." The mirrors went back to showing only Sophia's reflection. Her pale face and wide, shaky eyes stared back at her. She felt like the room had ripped away all the walls she had built to protect herself. For years, she thought of herself as smarter than everyone else. She believed she could stay one step ahead of trouble. But now, seeing the harm she had caused, she couldn't ignore it anymore. "What do you want from me?" she yelled, her voice cracking. "Do you want me to say I'm sorry? Is that it?" The voice softened but stayed firm. "This isn't about me, Sophia. It's about you. Can you admit to yourself what you've done? Can you take responsibility for the people you've hurt? Or will you keep pretending you had no choice?" Sophia fell to the floor, her tablet slipping from her hands. Tears filled her eyes as guilt crushed her. She had always thought of herself as a survivor, someone who did what was necessary in a tough world. But now, she realized she had turned into someone she didn't want to be. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't think it would hurt so many people." The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then the walls shifted and a door appeared. It led to a dimly lit hallway. Sophia hesitated, her legs shaking as she stood up. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she felt a small flicker of determination. If she was going to get through this, it wouldn't be by lying anymore. It would be by facing the truth. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. Meanwhile, Diego was in another chamber, a room that smelled like metal and felt heavy. The walls were cold concrete, and there was only one thing in the room, a punching bag swinging slightly as if someone had just pushed it. Diego stepped closer, his muscles tense. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. "Diego Torres," Alaric's voice echoed. "Age 36. The tough one. The protector. Or so you like to think." Diego turned slowly, his eyes scanning the room. "You think you've got me all figured out?" he growled. "I've heard it all before. Save your speech." Alaric's voice stayed calm. "Have you really heard it all, Diego? Have you ever listened to the voices of those you left behind? The people you were supposed to protect?" Before Diego could respond, the walls lit up, showing scenes from his past like a movie. The first scene was a family portrait. A younger Diego stood beside his parents and his little sister, Sophia. He remembered that day. It was Sophia's 5th birthday. She had been so happy, holding the doll he had bought for her with his saved money. But the scene changed. Sophia was crying as Diego walked out of their home for the last time. He had promised to come back, but he never did. "Family meant everything to you, didn't it?" Alaric's voice asked. "But when things got hard, you chose to leave." Diego clenched his fists. "I left to give them a better life," he said. "I couldn't stay in that place. There was nothing there for me." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Alaric's voice asked. "Or was it easier to leave than to face the responsibility of being there for them?" The scene disappeared and was replaced by another. Diego was older now, standing in a tiny apartment with his girlfriend, Maria, and their baby daughter, Clara. Maria was crying. "You don't have to do this," she begged. "We can figure it out together. Clara needs her dad." Diego remembered that moment. He had decided to join a dangerous group to make quick money. He told himself it was for his family, to give them a better future. But the truth was, he didn't want to deal with the struggles of an honest life. The scene changed again. Now Maria was packing her bags while holding a crying Clara. Diego's voice echoed in the room, a memory he wished he could forget. "You'll be better off without me," he had said coldly. "I'll just mess things up." Diego's chest felt heavy. He had told himself he left for their own good, but deep down he knew it was a lie. Suddenly the punching bag ripped open and photos spilled out onto the floor. Diego bent down and picked one up. It was a picture of Clara holding a soccer trophy, smiling brightly. But Diego wasn't in the photo. He had missed her milestones, her Ryanies, and her life. "You think you're strong, Diego," Alaric said. "But real strength isn't about muscles. It's about staying when it's hard. It's about showing up for the people who need you." Diego's head hung low. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The images on the walls were proof of everything he had failed to do. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. "I want you to face the truth," Alaric replied. "You call yourself a protector, but you've protected no one. The people who needed you most were the ones you left behind. Do you have the strength to change that?" Diego sat there, surrounded by the photos, feeling the full weight of his choices. For the first time, he let himself think about all the people he had let down: Sophia, Maria, Clara. "I can't change the past," he said, his voice breaking. "But I can try to make things right. I don't know how, but I have to try." The walls shifted, opening a path to the next stage. Diego stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. He couldn't run anymore. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, leaving the photos behind. In a secret control room deep below the mansion, Ethan Cross, also known as Alaric, watched everything on his monitors. His face was calm, but his sharp eyes flicked from screen to screen as Liam, Sophia, and Diego faced their trials. Ethan had carefully planned every part of this test. He believed people could only truly change when they faced their darkest truths. But as he watched the thieves, he felt something stir inside him. Once, Ethan had been a top agent for the CIA. He was brilliant at his job but paid a terrible price. A mission went wrong and his family, his wife and son, were killed as revenge. Grief consumed Ethan and he lost faith in the system he had served. Years later, he built this mansion as a way to confront people like the ones who had hurt him. He believed he was helping people change, but deep down he wondered if he was just projecting his own pain onto them. As the trials continued, Ethan whispered to himself, "Let's see if they can find redemption where I couldn't." Liam, Sophia, and Diego eventually stumbled into the mansion's central chamber. They were exhausted, carrying the weight of their trials. In the center of the room was a pedestal with a glowing red button. Alaric's voice echoed again. "You've faced your darkest truths. Now you have a choice. Press the button and the doors will open. But you'll leave unchanged, stuck in the same lives as before. Or you can choose to take responsibility for your actions and start making amends." The three thieves stood in silence, thinking about everything they had seen and felt. For the first time in years, they felt like more than just thieves. They felt human. Liam stared at the glowing button in front of him, his fingers twitching. His entire life had been spent running. Running from responsibilities, running from guilt, running from the consequences of his actions. But now, those consequences had finally caught up with him. For the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to keep running. "I've hurt so many people," Liam said quietly, his voice steady but uncharacteristically calm. "I thought I could get away with it because I was smarter, quicker. But all I did was make a mess of everything. Maybe it's time to stop." Sophia looked at him, her expression softening. She had spent so many years justifying her actions, convincing herself she was above morality because she was smarter than everyone else. But the faces she had seen in court, the lives she had ruined, had left a mark on her she couldn't shake. "I always told myself it was just business," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "But it wasn't. It was personal to them. And I don't know if I can fix it, but I have to try." Diego, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. "I've been running my whole life too," he admitted. "Running from my family, my responsibilities, my guilt. I don't even know if they'd want me back. But I have to find out." The three of them stood together in front of the pedestal, their movements slow and deliberate. Liam reached out first, his hand hovering over the glowing button. "If we press this," he said softly, "it all goes back to the way things were. But if we don't," Sophia finished, her voice steady, "we try to change." Diego nodded, his jaw set. "No more running." They stepped back, leaving the button untouched. The room went silent. Then the screens went dark and Alaric's voice returned. His tone was calm but carried a hint of satisfaction. "You've made your choice," Alaric said smoothly. "The doors will open. You're free to leave. What you do with that freedom is up to you." The walls shifted again, revealing an open passage leading to the mansion's grand entrance. The trio walked toward it together, their steps heavier, their shoulders straighter. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Each of them knew that the hardest part wasn't leaving the mansion. It was stepping out into the world and becoming the people they wanted to be. Liam exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, you're right." Sophia looked down at her tablet, her fingers hovering over the screen. For years, she had prided herself on being untouchable, using her skills to manipulate and outsmart everyone around her. But now, the faces of the victims haunted her. The young man she had framed for a crime he didn't commit, the families whose lives she had upended for profit. She knew she couldn't undo the damage, but maybe she could use her skills to help instead of harm. "I think I know what I need to do," she said quietly. "There's a lot of bad people out there, people like us and worse. I've got the skills to stop them. Maybe I can start there." Diego looked at her, his brow furrowed. "You're serious? You want to go after people like us?" Sophia shrugged. "Why not? If I can stop even one person from doing what I've done, maybe it'll mean something." Diego listened to their plans, the weight of his own guilt pressing down on him. For years, he had told himself that he wasn't good enough for his family, that they were better off without him. But now he realized that his absence had been the biggest betrayal of all. His daughter Clara had grown up without a father because he had been too scared to face his own failures. "I need to see my daughter," Diego said suddenly, his voice firm. She deserves to know the truth even if she hates me for it. Sophia reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. She won't hate you, Diego. She might be angry, but she won't hate you. Just don't give up on her. Liam nodded in agreement. Kids are tough. She might surprise you. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, the enormity of their decisions settling over them. They had walked into the mansion as thieves, expecting to leave with riches. Instead, they were walking out with something far more valuable, a chance to change, to become something better. As they parted ways, Liam looked back at the mansion. Its sleek silhouette bathed in moonlight. He didn't know who Alaric really was, but he felt a strange sense of gratitude. The trials had been brutal, but they had forced him to confront the man he had become, and the man he wanted to be. Good luck, Liam said, glancing at Sophia and Diego one last time. I guess we'll need it. We all do, Sophia said with a faint smile. Take care of yourselves, Diego added, his expression solemn. As they disappeared into the night, each heading toward an uncertain future, the mansion's lights flickered briefly before going dark. Inside, Ethan Cross watched their retreating figures on his monitors. His expression was unreadable. He had given them a choice and they had taken the first steps toward redemption. But whether they would succeed was up to them. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his voice barely a whisper. The rest is up to you now. Weeks passed after the events at the mansion. For Liam, Sophia, and Diego, the memories of that night lingered like shadows they couldn't shake. Each of them had left the house burdened by guilt, but also carrying a glimmer of hope, a belief that they could change. The road ahead was uncharted, filled with uncertainty. Yet they knew they couldn't return to the lives they had once led. Liam stood outside a nondescript office building in downtown Los Angeles. A folder of papers was clenched tightly in his hands. His palms were damp with sweat, and his heart raced as he stared at the door. The sign above read, Victims Restitution Program. For years, Liam had operated in the shadows, conning people out of their money and moving on without a second thought. But now, as he prepared to step inside and meet with a counselor, he felt a pang of dread. He had spent weeks tracking down the people he had wronged, reaching out to offer apologies and, where possible, monetary restitution. Some had accepted his words with cautious skepticism, while others had slammed doors in his face. Yet he persisted. He had sold his car and pawned off the few valuable items he owned to begin repaying his debts. This program was the next step, offering him a chance to work with legal experts to create a formal plan for restitution. As he entered the office, Liam caught his reflection in a glass door. For the first time in years, he saw a man who wasn't running away. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. This wasn't about erasing his past, it was about building a future he could live with. Sophia's life had taken an unexpected turn. She sat at a cramped desk in a small cybersecurity firm, her fingers flying over a keyboard as she analyzed a phishing attack targeting a local nonprofit. The job didn't pay much, but it didn't matter to her. For the first time, her skills were being used for something meaningful. After leaving the mansion, Sophia had spent sleepless nights reflecting on the faces she had seen in her trial. The victims of her hacks haunted her, their voices echoing in her mind. She had tried reaching out to a few of them, offering apologies through anonymous emails. She didn't expect forgiveness, but acknowledging her actions was something she felt she had to do. One day she received a response from James, the hacker she had framed years ago. His message was brief but poignant. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I appreciate that you tried. Maybe we can both move forward now. That message became her turning point. She vowed to use her expertise to protect instead of harm. The job at the cybersecurity firm came after weeks of rejections. But when she explained her background and determination, the owner, a retired ethical hacker, decided to take a chance on her. Now, Sophia was rebuilding her reputation one secure system at a time. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and for the first time she felt at peace. Diego parked his rusted pickup truck in front of a modest suburban house. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. It had taken him days to muster the courage to drive here. And now, as he sat in front of his ex-girlfriend Maria's home, he wasn't sure if he could get out of the truck. The photo of his daughter Clara, now 10 years old, was taped to the dashboard. He hadn't seen her since she was a toddler, and he had no idea how she would react to his sudden appearance. But after his trial at the mansion, he knew he couldn't stay away any longer. He owed it to her, and to himself, to try. Gathering his courage, Diego stepped out of the truck and walked up the driveway. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. Moments later, the door opened and Maria stood there, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Diego, she said, her voice wary. What are you doing here? I came to see Clara, Diego said, his voice trembling. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I want to try. I want to be her dad again. Maria studied him for a long moment before stepping aside. She's in the backyard. But if you mess this up, Diego? I won't, he said quickly. I swear. As he walked into the backyard, Diego saw Clara sitting on a swing. Her dark hair shined in the afternoon sun. She looked up as he approached, curious but cautious. Hi, Clara, Diego said softly. I'm your dad. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, Diego thought she might run away. But then she smiled, a small hesitant smile, and said, I know. Ethan Cross sat in his control room, the glow of the monitors casting long shadows across his face. He had been watching the three thieves from a distance, tracking their progress through public records, emails, and news stories. Each of them had taken steps toward redemption, though their journeys were far from over. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping thoughtfully against the desk. He had built the mansion's trials to force people to confront their darkest truths. But he hadn't expected to feel this invested in their outcomes. Their successes, however small, gave him a glimmer of hope. Hope that perhaps his experiment wasn't just an act of control, but a way to make a real difference. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to smile. Maybe, just maybe, people could change. The mansion was quiet once more, its sprawling rooms and high-tech corridors bathed in moonlight. The walls that had tested Liam, Sophia, and Diego stood silent, waiting. The systems lay dormant but ready, like a predator in the shadows. In the concealed control room, Ethan Cross sat at his desk, the glow of his monitors reflecting in his sharp, calculating eyes. He wasn't watching Liam, Sophia, or Diego anymore. Their paths were their own now. Instead, Ethan's attention was fixed on new profiles displayed across his screens, 3 new targets, carefully selected for their lies, corruption, and greed. Each one had a story of deceit, a pattern of exploitation, and a refusal to take responsibility for the damage they caused. The first profile was of Maxwell Reed, a polished corporate CEO whose multi-million-dollar company was built on the backs of exploited workers. Publicly, Reed was a philanthropist, donating to charities and championing sustainability. Privately, he orchestrated layoffs, cut corners on safety, and siphoned money from employees' retirement funds to pad his own bank account. His company was hailed as a beacon of innovation, but beneath the surface, it was rotten to the core. The second target was Emma Lawson, a high-profile defense attorney known for getting guilty criminals off scot-free. She had built her career bending the law, manipulating evidence, and defending those who used their wealth to escape justice. Emma cared only for her reputation and personal gain, and she had little regard for the families she trampled to maintain her power. The third was Ryan Black, a ruthless hacker with no allegiance to anyone but himself. Ryan made a living by breaking into secure systems, stealing intellectual property, and holding companies for ransom. He operated in the shadows, exploiting vulnerabilities for profit and causing chaos wherever he went. Ethan tapped a key, activating his control systems. His voice echoed through the mansion, echoing into its halls. The game begins again. In the weeks that followed, Liam, Sophia, and Diego continued down their paths, building new lives, trying to leave the past behind and confronting their own demons. But the mansion had left them with more than memories, it had left them with a mission. They couldn't forget the lessons they learned. Lessons about responsibility, about facing consequences, and about the fight to make things right. And slowly they began to realize that their paths could lead them back together. But first they had their own battles to fight, and new choices to make. Because in Ethan Cross's mansion, the game never truly ended. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.